Yeah, I do it all, baby. We're back to Fullmetal Alchemist. If you haven't seen the first episode of my reviews for this show, the crux for this format is that I watch and then review a chunk of this show that one opening covers. We already did OP1, which covered the first 14 episodes, and now we're going to do OP2, which covers the next 12. A little behind the scenes, how the sausage is made from my thought process on that is that while often openings cover entire seasons, sometimes they don't, and this format can sometimes lead to an interesting point to stop and think while watching a show to gather my thoughts and opinions. Also, I like anime openings when they're good, so they're fun to talk about too. Reminder, I've seen this before, but my brain doesn't seem to have retained nearly any of it, so it's basically a blind watch through. Let's start with the opening this time again, because I think this opening kind of fucking rules. It sounds great. You guys think it would be worth my time to learn Japanese just so I can accurately comment on the lyrics of openings? What's the time commitment to bit quality ratio on that idea? I think it'd be pretty sugoi. Anyway, I like the song for this one better, I think. While the song for the first OP is good and all, it's probably also the weakest part of that opening for me. But without the song, the OP wouldn't even be shot like that, because yeah, I know, you're an intellectual. I'm just saying the song isn't exactly for me. This one shares a lot of similarities with it though. It starts slow and introspective before gaining momentum and exploding into our action shots, which I suppose is just the format for a lot of anime openings. This one just hits my ears better, I guess. Why don't these idiots just take the train though? Oh, it's supposed to be imagery about how their journey has started, but still the road is long and there's no end in sight. Fair enough then, good point. It of course has your anime standard quick shot of secondary and tertiary characters showing off their one thing. That guy likes eating, paralyzed guy, spoilers, likes smoking. Hawkeye likes shooting guns, and then of course you have my favorite character, Dog Haver. I'm starting to realize that in a 90-second anime opening, you don't have a lot of time, and I suppose it's not a bad use of 5 to 7 seconds. I'm starting to hate it less. What, I'm not allowed to have my own character arc? The action shots for the opening are of course great, which I have a feeling will be pretty standard for these opening. My brain kind of falls apart here though, when I think Edward throws Envy, but the impact seems to come from the side of the screen where they start, not where she was thrown to. Maybe I'm just not seeing it right. Also, small side note, does this fight during sunset at this factory location ever actually take place? Because it looks pretty sweet. I also like the fact that the theme of Edward reaching out for his mother continues, at least that's what I figure. In the start of the first one, we see him reaching out and then a shot of his mother, but in this one, he reaches towards the sky or to the heavens and thus his dead mother, which I think is very nice. And finally, the sickest shot of them all, the shot of the sunset and Edward and his dad at the cemetery. Look how fucking good this looks. I don't even really have anything to say about it other than it looks sick. And Edward looks up to the song, and his dad looks to Ed with the song, and then the shot changes to the beat. Oh, that's good shit. Basically, if this review turns out to be negative, yeah, I think you could have been fooled into liking this show by the opening alone. It's great. Now, on to the actual show. I always find myself thinking that these episodes feel long, and usually when people say that, that's a negative. When you're enjoying something, the time seems to fly by, and the opposite is true when you're not enjoying something. But that's not how I feel with this show. The episodes feel long, and I'm enjoying it, which is a pretty cool combo. I think it stems from basically every scene holding a lot of weight in one way or another. It's either a very important scene to one of the few plot lines the show has been doing a good job of stringing together, or a scene where our characters explore where they are emotionally with themselves or with one another, or it's a very interesting action scene. I can't think of a scene in these 12 episodes that I would call filler. Everything seems important. And it's kind of crazy that a show like this can string together so many scenes over and over and stitch them together into a few different storylines and have them all keep moving and never feel stale. I was impressed with the storytelling at the start of the show, and it's only gotten stronger. The show really knows what to take its time with, the stuff that's important to our characters. And when the story feels like it's tackled where it is and handled those events with enough weight, it moves on and introduces more elements and characters. I'm very impressed with it. There was somewhere in the middle of the season where I thought, okay, we're kind of just standing around again when Ed and Al and Winry found out about Hughes' death and that whole military framing took place, but pretty much as soon as I had that thought, the show got moving again, so it only felt slow for maybe an episode, and that slowness is probably warranted. It's good that the show takes time to let characters feel and feel loudly. If it didn't, this show and the characters wouldn't be so highly regarded as it is, I'm sure. I think it was just the combination of feeling Hughes' character was a little much and a little forced, and him getting a pretty minor amount of screen time overall for this big multi-episode reaction, as well as the framing taking place around Ross, who's another character I'm not all that interested in. The plot of the framing is interesting and leads into the fact that the entire military, and therefore military government, knows about the homunculi, and there's some screwy shit going on there, so I see the utility for sure, but I'm just saying that part dragged just a hair for me. And if that's the only negative comment I have to say about the pacing and storytelling, I gotta say, that's some glowing praise. You guys know me, I'm a huge persnickety bitch, so that's great. And I do want to comment on the slower, quieter scenes this show does so well too. It's very important, of course, for our characters to feel fleshed out and real, so when they go through hardship or loss or immense challenges, we can root for them or empathize with them. And I feel like, at least in my pinhole viewpoint of anime, and especially shonen anime, most shows don't take the time to have these smaller but all-important moments. Ed and Alphonse are obviously tragic characters, but often don't feel that way due to their attitude and bullheadedness and drive. The show explored their backstory heavily in the first 14 episodes and doesn't get bogged down with them feeling bad for themselves, but it still illustrates enough to show us why they're so driven. With that stuff being out of the way now, their emotional states are less often explored, but it's still very central to them. Ed especially, we'll come back to Alphonse in a minute. One of Edward's strongest character traits is a feeling of responsibility. He feels responsible for what happened to Alphonse. He feels responsible for getting Alphonse's and his own body back to normal. He feels responsible for protecting Winry, and now he also feels responsible for Hughes's death, since he was the one that got Hughes involved. And that takes another large toll on him. And I think the interesting part about that is that that one's much less justifiable. Hughes knew he was taking risks, and despite not knowing how dangerous things were exactly, he knew there was danger, and he was a trained and highly ranking soldier. Edward has the right to feel guilty for sure, but it's probably a little less well-founded. But a big theme of this show is dealing with loss and how people react to it, so adding a fresh loss onto that is effective in recentering the focus on those feelings. Ed not having to feel as guilty as he does, I think that might be a road they're going down with him. I mentioned last review for this show that Edward always seems to want to shoulder every burden himself, so the others around him have to do and feel less. But as I believe I said last time as well, that's a horrible way to live. You're not helping anyone by doing that. You're only hurting yourself, which once again hurts the people around you that care about you. Alphonse even starts to call him out for this behavior. He's like, fucking dude, come on, we're in this together.
I was right there with you, and I knew that there were risks. So quit trying to shoulder all of this on your own.
Edward is a character that is constantly seeking redemption, even when those around him don't feel like he needs to be redeemed, and even when the dialogue is a little cringy.
Next time I make you cry, I hope there'll be tears of joy. And Al and I will be back in our normal bodies, and I'll make you cry out of sheer happiness.
And I hope Edward does learn the lesson that leaning on people doesn't make him less of a man or less of a protector. It's so easy to have your main character be the toughest one that pushes through everything, but it's a lot more interesting, I would think, to have a character that wants to be that for the sake of the people around him and learns that it doesn't have to be that way because of the people around him. And I feel like the show has the level of writing and emotional maturity to go that way, and I hope it does. Alphonse, I'm once again a little disappointed in. The show sometimes just doesn't know what to do with him. He should certainly be the deuteragonist to Edward, but I just find myself noticing how often he's just following behind and doing what his brother does. I know their goals are very much aligned, but he should be his own character too. He's handy in a fight. I like his character and attitude, don't mind him being around at all, but his actions in the story don't seem to carry a ton of weight still. The plot is driven in large part due to him and trying to get his body back, so it's not like his presence is ever unimportant. It's just more that with how much is going on in this show, he doesn't seem to get as many moments as he should with how important of a character he is. The show even tries to throw in thoughts about his situation to give him things to worry about, like the idea that the armor will reject his soul eventually. That's basically pulled out of thin air after he sees Barry's body decaying from having a different soul in it. Yeah, but that dude is made of meat, and you are currently made of metal. And you've been like this for years. I don't know, that little plot point didn't really hit for me. It also leads into a bunch of other what seems like baseless conjecture about Ed figuring out that Al's body is still in the portal, and a few other conclusions he makes just seem to materialize from almost nowhere. And that ends up being plot important since Edward does this portal shit in a desperation play to get out of the gluttony void at the end of the season. Maybe some of it just went over my head, but their conclusion of truth still having their bodies didn't connect in my brain somewhere along the line. Anyway, it just felt like they'd noticed Alphonse didn't have much going on at the moment. He starts to have something going on his own when he has to break bread with gluttony in the closing episodes of this set, but that's right at the very end, so I can't call it a great success for him yet. I hope a big part of his arc is stepping out of his older brother's shadow. He seems to be just as skilled as Edward in their youth, and now being able to transmute without a circle, he should, in theory, be just as powerful and versatile. But still, it's Edward that leads the way on this mission. They both have the same want to complete. It's Edward who's the ranking state alchemist. It's Edward that will, it seems, end up getting the girl. I hope Alphonse grows in confidence and learns to stand beside Edward rather than a step behind him. He's had it just as rough, if not worse than his brother, but he seems to be more emotionally mature than both Ed and Winry. Maybe it's just because he physically can't cry, which is very sad now that I think about it, but he stays more level-headed than both of them in nearly every situation. He even says it himself. I think Alphonse has a lot of potential as a character, and I know we're not even halfway through the show yet, so there's still tons of time for it to be realized. I just hope that potential doesn't get wasted. The third big character I want to talk about is Scar. But actually, before we do, I'm going to do this real quick. I'm going to be better about doing this. You guys should like the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. It really helps, and I would appreciate it if you did. Okay, now we do the Scar thing. Scar seemed, upon a glance, to be a character that I wouldn't care for. I don't really vibe with the grumbling, badass archetype very often, but the show does a great job of showing that he has interesting views and reasonings for his actions, which elevates him just above cold murderer that needs to be be overcome. I don't want to forget to put this in the script, so I'm writing it at the start of the Scar part. There's this moment in his backstory flashbacks where the Emestrians are invading his home, their glowing blue eyes contrasting the red eyes of his people. And there's this shot where it seems like an anime, lazy, time-saving effort where there's a bunch of soldiers marching and they all have the same face. But I don't think it's lazy. I think that shot is on purpose, right? Scar sees the invaders of his home and murderers of his people and family as all the same. They're just this. They're not individuals, they're just evil. This is told in his flashback. Even Winry's dad only looks slightly different than the men in that shot. I think that's very cool if that's what they were going for. Anyway, besides that, Scar's motivations are obviously somewhat understandable, which helps. And I find it interesting that he has this code and understanding with himself that he is absolutely just another person killing again because someone killed someone, because someone killed someone, because someone killed someone, and he's okay with that. He's not blind to being a part of that cycle, he just accepts it. The Emestrians drew first blood and he feels they will face no justice unless he delivers it to them, and he's fine with killing and maiming to do it. But his prejudice is what fuels him. He's not just a maniac, he treats people from other places with respect. He bears them no ill will. He even offers to help a little girl find her lost pet because he feels a connection to her backstory. He puts the little girl dog chimera out of its misery because he pities it, not because he hated it. I don't know if there's some sort of redemption arc for him coming up, but he certainly has some traits to show that he's a hateful person, not just hate incarnate. The most interesting moment he had, for me at least, is when Winry has him at gunpoint and they both find out that he murdered her parents. I kind of wish he didn't do it in like a hazy, barely conscious, rage-filled state so it could feel more fully exactly his fault, but whatever, I guess. He tells Winry that shooting him would be justified. He took her family from her. If he chooses to murder these people in the memory of his people and his family, he sees it as completely fair for someone to do the same to him, which is super interesting. Like I said, he doesn't fucking care that he's perpetuating the cycle of violence, and naturally that means he realizes that the cycle will come back around to him eventually. Very interesting. I like that a lot for a villain. He sees alchemy as a force of evil rather than a tool or a magic. He often refers to it as a belief or a religion, asking people if this alchemy they train and follow is worth it, even when its use has resulted in horrific outcomes and atrocities being committed. He sees alchemy as a concept, as an idea, and as his enemy, which is a pretty cool thought. I'm basically just listing things I found cool about Scar at this point, I've just realized, but I'm really rather taken aback at how much the show has managed to make me find him interesting. And that's not even to mention the parallels he has with Edward and Alphonse. He lost his family, just like our lead characters, specifically his brother. He lost an arm, just like Ed. He commits all these heinous acts in the memory of his brother. He and Edward are just the same. Alchemy took from them. The only differences are that Edward and Alphonse might have a way back from it, and they did it to themselves. Scar has no way back, and some horrible monsters knocked down his borders and did it to him. Edward and Scar share a lot of similarities, though the show hasn't commented on them much yet. Once again, it's another element I hope the show goes into. The story, once again, I have to mention, only covering 12 episodes here, is capturing me more, I think. I'm glad there's more of a political slant than I imagine. It helps keep the episodes fresh when compared to other shows I've seen where it's just action and funny haha anime humor and then they just loop that. And the political stuff doesn't seem performative at all. Cough. Solo leveling. Cough. They do a good job of exploring each plotline without forgetting about the others. A big part of this batch of episodes was the military plotline, where we slowly learn more and more about it until we find that surprise is actually a plot tied into the Homunculus plotline. Like, of course we knew that a little bit, but we didn't know just how much. And it sort of impressed me that the crew finding out about Bradley's homunculus hood comes in a conversation where they just deduce it. It seems like that would be a big holy shit reveal for the main cast, but it plays with your expectations and has them figure it out on their own because they're smart. Very nice. Also, I find myself wondering, with the revelation about what happened to Xerxes and the homunculi's hand in it, do we know yet why Amestria invaded Ishval? It may have been said at some point, but if it was, I forgot. And even then, if they did say it, with all the new information we have, it probably wasn't the truth. So what I'm saying is, since we know the government is willingly run by the homunculi, and we know the homunculi sacrificed all of Xerxes, were the homunculi trying to do the same with Ishval? I'm not sure. I like this format because I get to think more deeply about the show at stopping points, think about where the characters and stories are going. Like Ling and Mei Chang have been around for 12 episodes now, and well, I know not every episode, but their stuff hasn't really gone anywhere as of yet. They'll clearly have something to do with each other, both being from Xing and both mentioning the caste order in that country and how they come from very different lives. But so far, they've been largely ornamental. I like Ling, once again, more than I thought I would. From how he comes in, he just seems like a goofball, but he's not too goofy, and often his serious side wins out. So he's much more palatable than, say, a Hughes for me. He's confident and good in a fight and has a good sense of humor, as well as being a good enough guy to not abandon his subordinates. I think somehow he may still be a villain, though, since every time he says he wants to be immortal, immortal. He says it in this crazy, sinister, evil voice. Mei Chang's voice is appropriate, and her voice actress does a good job of not delivering lines annoyingly, even though the voice is just kind of annoying on its own. I don't know. I don't have much to say about Mei Chang yet, despite being introduced early on in this batch of episodes. We don't see her again for I feel like 9 or 10 of them. I just pray the joke about her hearing about Edward actually plays out, that she will just be disappointed that he is not how she pictures him, and that will just be the one-off joke. I hope it's not a running gag where she has this weird obsessive crush on him. That would suck. On the topic of humor, maybe I was just in a good mood while watching this, but I think it's a lot better. Sometimes the show actually tries to tell a joke, like with timing and a punchline and everything. It's pretty refreshing in the face of the comedy at the start of the show. Even Avatar needed about 14 episodes before its comedy found its footing, so it's not at all impossible. Even the jokes where the characters just go, whoa, are set up and timed better, I think. But it can still invade and throw off what are otherwise serious scenes, and that can be annoying. Before we get back into the plot, where I want to talk about the homunculi, I should mention the action again. I think it's a little less impressive this time around for sure. The fights still play out the way I desperately want anime fights to play out. Short and sweet is much better than long and riddled with flashbacks to first grade. And while the fights are still animated very well, I find them to be a little less creative. Now, I know we can't have every fight eat up the entire power bill for all of Japan every time the plot demands a little scuffle, and besides, lower key fights help highlight the really awesome, great big ones. But some elements to these fights feel a little less polished to me. The choreography is less impressive, and there are a lot of shots of character doing a close action, cut to a wide shot of that action, rather than just showing the full action, which is a shortcut a lot of shows take, and honestly, it's a fine creative choice once in a while. I just noticed it a lot more when what I loved about the action for this show was how fluid and creative it could be. That's not to say there's no really cool animation. That shit where Mustang fries lust, wow, that looks great and sounds great. Great moment. I'm honestly surprised the show killed her so early. She seems like the kind of character that would stick around and be the annoying smug villain the whole time. So props for catching me off guard and nuking her ass. Honestly, if I'm being really fair to the show, those criticisms kind of go out the window as the season goes on. It gets better, so maybe it was just a few episodes that didn't work for me. The world once again feels like it's not taking advantage of the magic system to me though. When Mustang was like, haha, we can turn that water she just dropped on us into an explosive, I was like, oh shit, true bestie. But surely that means you could be way more creative in nearly every situation if you can do that. I've also noticed the animation in the slower or quieter moments really holding on single frames, which isn't a sin or anything. Every show does that. Just once again, I'm just noticing it more. Like, hello? Oh, there we go. And at the end of the day, this is really just a random grab of 12 episodes from a 60-plus episode run of a show. The show has instilled enough goodwill in me that I suspect the action will pick up again greatly. Now, onto the homunculus plot. First of all, I really like that each one of them seems to have a super form, really opens up what they can seem to do. I guess I already saw that with Greed last season, but it didn't really dawn on me that that's what I was seeing. And it does leave me wondering what Lust's super form would have been, unless it was just the big spiky fingers. Also, the Hohenheim stuff is 1 part confusing, 2 parts intriguing, probably. Him just showing up briefly seemed out of nowhere, but I'm sure it was important. I'm also not convinced that the person the homunculi call Father and Hohenheim are the same guy. Like, Father might be yet another homunculus based on him or something. I'm not sure. I just get the vibe that there are 2 dudes that look exactly like this in the story and it's trying to trick me, but I'm simply too intelligent. Right? Surely I'm right. But there is another theory forming in my head that if I'm wrong and the real Hohenheim is in fact Father, like it is the same guy and he does turn out to be a homunculus still, that would make Ed and Alphonse the offspring of a homunculus, which tie them in tighter to that whole plot line. The 7 deadly sins would be their family in a way. I know it said somewhere in season 1 homunculi can't have kids, but whatever, we're learning new shit all the time in the show. I doubt everything they tell us is strictly true. I did have the question, if Brad is king and a fake person, where did he come from? How did he become king if he had no backstory, no childhood? But that was answered by the fact that the government knows that he's a homunculi, and he also had a childhood on top of that. Apparently you could become a homunculus while you were human beforehand. So maybe Hohenheim has that sort of deal going on? Granny does say he looks the exact same, and I don't think homunculi age. I don't know, there's a lot of interesting shit going on with him. Also, Brad has a voice in his head that he calls Pride, and Pride has the exact same voice as his adopted son. So I am very prepared for that bomb to drop. Also, that paper sucked. What was even the thesis? My dad rules? Yeah, no shit, kid. He's king, stupid kid. They keep mentioning a portal to the truth realm and a sacrifice they need for it, and from what I can gather, that sacrifice has to be an alchemist. They haven't said that outright yet, but just trying to use my brain over here. And with gluttony being a failed portal to truth, is Hohenheim like a failed sacrifice maybe? I don't know. There are many plot points all spiraling around each other, and they just haven't connected yet. It's all very interesting. I hope it all comes together. Also, on the topic of my dumbass theories, haha, I was right. It was Alphonse in that body, and I don't lose any points for having technically seen this and not remembering. That counts as a full-on correct theory, according to me. It also ties into the one emotional through line I don't really follow from the show right now. So the boys have been of the opinion that human transmutation is impossible to do correctly, right? So then they find out that the thing they brought back wasn't their mom, and then Ed is all sad about it. Maybe I'm an idiot, but why are you sad about it? You know whatever you created was a monstrosity, and you have concluded that the process is impossible, so why are you sad that you didn't bring back your mom to exist for another few brutal moments of agony? Shouldn't that be a good thing that it wasn't your mom? Teacher seems to think so. She's glad she didn't put her child through that pain, and I'm on her side. I guess I just missed something? Like, why is Edward sad there? But that's the only big hiccup the show had for me in its storytelling, other than the weird conclusions Ed came to about Al's body still being trapped. And I honestly err more on the side of me not understanding than the show not doing a good enough job explaining, but now I have a new baseless theory. When Edward was in the truth zone, he saw Al's body, but that's just his body, and he was able to talk and recognize Edward. In my mind, he should just be a husk with no soul, no recognition or emotion, which sort of opens up the idea that whatever is in the suit of armor isn't Alphonse again, even though the show seems to tell us over and over that it is. Which is why my new theory is that there are two Alphonses now, both fully legitimately actually Alphonse. Is that like a full order of magnitude dumber than any of my other theories? I think it might be. I was impressed with the first 14 episodes of this show. Having watched those ones before I made a video on it, like way back years ago, I was surprised with how much I did end up thinking it was quite good. With these ones, I remember even less, which I'm enjoying a lot. I remember Envy turning into a big green monster, but that was honestly about it. I think the show is executing basically everything very well. The story's great, characters, even characters that seemed bland before, are growing or showing sides of themselves that went unseen before. And every new development adds interesting angles and folds to the story that, while expanding the world, most don't feel disconnected from the events happening that we care about. These 12 episodes were very strong. I'm enjoying it a lot, and we'll come back to see the next bunch soon. Patreon shoutouts. You want to see a brand new video from me ahead of the YouTube release? You can support me on Patreon for just a few bucks. Link, as always, is in the description below the video. Biggest shoutouts of all go to my top patrons, A Flock of Plain Cakes, who has a group of lovely woodland creatures they befriended by playing a lute in a meadow that will horribly dismember anything on command. A2AX Phoenix, who got the other half of Superman's X-ray vision, allowing them to see through only lead. Anthony Collins, who I once saw stand up out of a chair without moving. I don't know what I saw. I blacked out after that. That dude's freaky. Insomnite, who has been holding their breath since 2008 and no one has noticed yet. Midnight Balzoms, who somehow defeated one of those mechanical bulls in a real bullfight. Slowkey, who thinks they were justified in slaying that probably one-of-one rhino the size of an elephant because it was about to run through that lovely family-owned bakery. Support local. Tater of Tots, who is the only, and I mean the only reason the Earth is still spinning. That shit stopped spinning automatically years ago. That one Turian, who has brain radio. The station selection is pretty whack though. It's all Zeta Reticulan podcast. And Trendkill, who wrote a poem so beautiful it actually made the human soul detectable by human instruments while reading it. And of course, my other fuck you money patrons, Blanco, Kevin Bartlin, Potato Stream, Saint Expedite, The Four Meaning of Life, The 1am Party, Vector, and Whitrow. And my god overanalyzers, Ang, Andrew Watchard, Anzio Ruiz, Blade Dancer, Boniverse, Carlo Wren, Chandler Crump, Chase Wing, Cosmic Newbie, Derek Chapman, Dr. Xerox, Dominic Saint, Emma, Aaron Grace, Fire Lizard 44, I'm a Match, Jake Hogan, Jackson, Jeremy Rubenstein, Jimth, John Warhammer, Justin Scott, Coco Rez, Mac, Matthew Lang, Michael Fellon, Mitchell Gobrecht, Nick, Nicholas Abbott, Peter Bandera, Peter Bayron, Philip Jindra, Pogger White, Rocket Mist, Ryan Maxwell, St. Charlie, Salvar, Scoobert, Shane Antonacci, Silktoe, Science Person, Smarty Marty, Princess Useless Backwards, Super Snipper, That Blind Ginger, Totoro Bobro's Musical Emporium, and some sort of bear face. Does anyone really know what that thing is yet? I haven't really put it together. Next up, another one of these, I think. Maybe I'll look at the Patreon comments, see if you guys have a good idea.